Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. Today, we will be talking about Russian hacking group Shuckworm using removable USB flash drives to target military missions in Ukraine with malware. If you do any kind of annual security training, you may have heard to never plug in a random flash drive. Well, it is likely someone just accidentally forgot the drive somewhere in public. It's not totally uncommon for random flash drives to contain malware. If you really need a removable flash drive, please just buy one, or consider using some form of cloud storage like Google Drive, OneDrive, or Mega. Don't just pick off a flash drive off the seat at the airport. This is especially important for any work-related devices, as the malware could potentially access sensitive data about your work that, well, it probably shouldn't be able to. Not that your personal data is any less important, you should also protect that, but corporate data involves a lot more people. Anyways, let's talk about this campaign specifically. It started in February of this year, 2025, and continued into March. And although it took place in Ukraine, it was said to be against a Western country that had a presence in Ukraine, rather than Ukraine itself. A malware known as Gamma-Steal, which is an Infostealer, was found on devices, which also displayed some unusual activity like the creation of a Windows registry value under the user assist key. Windows registry is kind of like a hierarchical database for all the low-level Windows operating system configurations. Making changes to it can affect the operating system itself, device drivers, different services that run on it, user accounts, applications, pretty much everything. I do not recommend making any changes in there unless you really know what you're doing, because it can screw up your computer pretty bad. Malware writing to the registry is, of course, changing some of these configurations. In this case, it appears to be modifying the operating system to hide all hidden and system files. Now, hidden files are hidden by default, that's why they're called hidden files, but I, and many people, always turn on Show Hidden Files, as it can be really useful for troubleshooting, or finding files you actually need to mess with that the average user probably should not be messing with. This action is likely to cover up new files that will be created as a result of the malware infection. After the malware added this new value, Windows Explorer launched a rather unusual process and ran a script to contact a command and control or a C2 server based in Russia. This is establishing communication of the infected device to a host server that is capable of controlling the malware running on it. More scripts were grabbed from this C2 server, one of which captured and exfiltrated screenshots of the machine it was running on. It also ran the system info command to get details on things running on the host, applications, security tools, things of that nature, and it looked for files and folders in the desktop and listed running processes. This is all to get an idea of what kind of security tools and processes are running that the hackers may have to work around, and, of course, to see what kind of information may be on the machine or what its role may be based on what is currently running. The second script was Gamma-Steal that I mentioned before, which of course steals information from files on the device and exfiltrates it back to the attackers. So that's all bad, but where does the USB removable drive come into play here? Why are we so sure this infection was a flash drive and not a phishing email or a download from a shady website? Well, this is because when the Windows registry value was created, there was evidence that an infected device and an LNK file, which is just a shortcut file, named d:/files.lnk was responsible. The D drive is what you would typically get when you plug in a removable device. The C drive is your default file system on your device, so D, the next letter, that's whatever the first removable device you plug in is. One thing to note is the malware also did seem to be able to copy itself to other removable drives. So it's possible that there was a different entry point. It copied itself to a drive that was perhaps legitimately being used by this Western military. That drive was shared with someone else, and the malware was able to infect the machine from that infected drive. However, the current theory is that it was indeed a infected drive responsible for the initial malware infection. There wasn't any evidence, I believe, found of phishing emails or suspicious downloads that may have caused this instead. How the drive happened to get over there is up for debate. It could have been strategically dropped, mailed. There's a lot of possibilities. Now, Shuckworm is not the biggest threat when it comes to Russian-backed hacking groups. In fact, I hadn't really heard of them much at all, but they had been relentlessly targeting Ukraine and slowly becoming more sophisticated. The reason I haven't talked about them much on this podcast is because most of the stuff that makes the news I read is regarding ransomware, and this is more of a cyber military effort, rather than ransomware attacks on various corporations. Though I do also think cyber warfare is important to discuss, as it's an upcoming topic, and really, it's going to become a lot more common, especially as militaries, governments, and citizens all rely on the internet and computers to get basic information. Thank you to Symantec, Bleeping Computer, and the Hacker News for information on this attack. I really like doing malware explanations like these. I find it fascinating to just go through how these attacks can happen. And of course, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime. My name is Chloe Tonis, and until next time, stay secure.